Let's do another exercise. This one focused on your responses and commitments. Take your pen and paper and answer the questions on this slide. If you need more time, you can pause the video. How do you typically respond to requests? Do you use the 4 responses that we've talked about in this course? Or do you respond in other ways? And how does that work? Do you ever say no? Do you believe you have the ability to say no? If you do say no, who is it to? And are there people you never say no to? Do you make counteroffers? Do you make clear, specific commitments? Or are your commitments vague? Do they have due dates? Do they address the conditions of satisfaction as well as the action that your customer has requested? Do you tend to overcommit? Do you always or almost always fulfill commitments that you make? When you do fail to fulfill commitments, what gets in the way? What kinds of things keep you from doing that? After looking at your answers to these questions, what do you notice about the responses and commitments you make? And is there anything that you might want to do differently now that you have gone through some of this course? Sometimes you can't deliver as promised. Something comes up that is more important to attend to. Something happens that prevents you from getting the work done on time as agreed to, or both. Something you didn't count on gets in the way. It can be anything from, oh, the network is down, I can't do any work, to, your boss came along and asked you to do something and said this is the highest priority, and now you've got to go off and tell the other person, I can't do what you've asked me to do and I've committed to doing in the time frame that we had. In terms of maintaining trust of your customer, the key is to get to that person as soon as you know or even suspect that you may not be able to deliver as promised, and explain why, and tell them you need to revoke your commitment. People often avoid telling the customer they can't deliver because it's uncomfortable, especially if they're overcommitted. They just sort of hope that somehow it'll all work out. Magically, somehow I'll get it done, or maybe even better, magically my customer will come down with a toothache and need to go see a dentist, and I won't have to go to him and tell him that I'll have a few extra hours to get this done. But the negative consequences are that this erodes trust. This little diagram here we have on the left side, the vertical axis, we have trust, high and low. Horizontal axis, we have time. And there's a point there, the commitment is the point in time when you commit to a deliverable. The due date, of course, is the date and time you've committed to deliver. And then there's this point of no return, which is the point in time after which your customer will not be able to find another way to get the deliverable by the due date. There's nothing that they'll be able to do after that point. If you revoke your commitment before the point of no return, your customer's trust in you will probably remain fairly high. If you wait until after the due date to say, I'm sorry, I couldn't get it done, and you do that once, maybe trust will be maintained. If you do it more than 2 or 3 times, though, you'll likely lose your customer's trust. So how do you manage commitments so that you don't have that happen, so that you don't miss your due date, so that you can deliver when you've said you will? Many people I've worked with have found ways to track their outstanding commitments in order to manage their time and attention and make sure they don't fail to deliver. Here's an example of a simple matrix for doing that. Tracking commitments makes it easy to literally see when you are overcommitted and may need to say no, refrain from making new offers, and or revoke and renegotiate one or two commitments. When you know what you've got on your plate and your boss asks you to do that one more thing, it is certainly easier to say something like, hey, I'm overloaded at this point. Can you help me prioritize the work I've already committed to? And then you can say, look, here are the things I've committed to. 2 of them are for you, Anne. Is it okay if we push one of these things in order to, or do I have to go to Tom? And well, I've already need to revoke that, but do I have to go to someone else too and tell them I need to revoke my commitment to them? Help me figure this out. Now, you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, my boss will just say, you go figure it out. This is actually a good reason for entire work groups, including the boss, to adopt this language and process for making commitments. When everyone understands these conversations and the value of having them, the entire group becomes more effective at coordinating action. I've worked with teams that have gone from being among the lowest performing in their companies to being the top performing teams that everyone else wants to emulate. I've also seen what can happen to an entire company when everyone adopts and uses these particular conversations for action. So, from the customer perspective, if you need to manage your commitments, things you can do include make sure you make complete requests, get specific commitments. Wait until the person says, yes, I'll do that, or, I can't, and you have a negotiation, and then you get a specific commitment. Be clear that you want to know. You want them to tell you as soon as possible if there is a problem in delivering. And also, if you no longer need what you asked for, cancel your request so that the other person doesn't do work they don't need to do. From the perspective of the performer, managing commitments is key, really, to building trust and being accountable. First, make sure you understand what your customer wants. If there is missing information, ask for it. Not everyone knows what a complete request sounds like. You may have to help them fill in the blanks. Second, make a specific commitment. I'll try, or I'll see what I can do is not a clear commitment. If you're going to try, what are you willing to commit to trying? When will you come back and say you've tried and you couldn't or didn't do it, and it didn't work? If you're going to try, be clear about what, when, and how long you will try so the customer knows what to expect. For example, imagine I'm your boss and you've brought up a concern about a particular company policy that you see as making it more difficult for you to do your job. You ask if I can get the policy changed. One response is that I could say is, I'll try and see what I can do. But if that's the extent of my commitment, you're left wondering how much trying I'm going to do, when and for how long. A more specific commitment might sound like, I have a meeting with senior management Thursday. I'll tell them about your concern and ask if we can change this policy. I'll let you know what their response is Thursday afternoon. Once you've committed, you may need to delegate or get help to deliver on your commitment. You need to make requests and get commitments from others that will allow you to keep your original commitment. As we discussed earlier, if something comes up along the way that might or will prevent you from fulfilling that original commitment, let your customer know as soon as you know or even suspect. Revoke your commitment and negotiate as necessary. Finally, once you've completed the work, it's useful to your customer to let him or her know so they can cross it off their list rather than wondering if it was actually done and having to come back to you to ask. Okay, so here's another short exercise. take out your pen and paper, and as the instruction says, write out a complaint you have about something someone told you they'd do but didn't. Write the complaint as if you are talking directly to the person who failed to do what they'd committed to doing. And again, if you need more time, pause the video. There are two forms of complaints. One I often call whining, and the other is making complaints for action. Whining is when we complain about a person or situation to a third party. If we're honest, we make this kind of complaint without being invested in anything changing. However, if we go to that third party and complain, somehow imagining something will change, we might be disappointed. In fact, we're very likely to be disappointed. You can complain to Anne about Robert in hopes that he will do something different, but it's likely that that's not going to happen. Sometimes people whine to a third party in hopes of getting that person on their side against the person you've got the complaint about. This kind of complaining can sow seeds of discord in an organization that can have all sorts of negative repercussions. However, whining is useful to blow off steam, to clear our minds so we can focus on what we really need. And it can be used that way. You can actually say, and I do this often, go to somebody and say, can I whine to you for a minute or two? And you do it without expectation then of anything changing except your own, what's going on in your own head. But beyond that, whining doesn't serve any good purpose. Making what is sometimes called a complaint for action, on the other hand, can lead to getting what you want or need. This is a conversation you have directly with the person who has failed to fulfill a commitment they've made. Making a complaint for action holds the person who has made that commitment accountable for it, directly and personally. Here is a kind of template or language for making a complaint for action. You committed to doing such and such and did not fulfill that commitment. This should be a simple, straightforward statement of fact. For example, you committed to getting information to me on how many accounts we have open by the end of the day yesterday, and you still haven't sent it to me. Then, this has caused some damage to me, us, the team, etc., specifically, whatever. This statement should also include facts, like our report to the VP will be late, and may also include assessments like senior management is losing trust in our ability to deliver work on time, and they may withhold our annual bonuses. So you put in the potential damage. Then you can ask, how do you see this situation? How do you see this? This is optional, but by asking this question, you're giving the other person an opportunity to explain from his or her perspective what's going on. Ideally, the other person takes this question as an opportunity to apologize and recommit. It's possible, too, that this person may respond by offering excuses, blaming others, or otherwise denying responsibility. If this happens, just move on to the last part of the complaint for action, which is, I request that you repair the damage by doing whatever. And this should be a simple, direct request. It may or may not be appropriate to remake the original request. You may simply want to ask the person to apologize in some cases to you and or others, and declare that they'll do things differently next time. This little flowchart shows when it's appropriate to make a complaint for action. I often hear people complaining that their subordinates, bosses, or coworkers don't do what they said they'd do. But when they go back and look at what actually happened or didn't happen, they see there was never a request made. It was just an expectation or assumption about what the other person should do. Or there was a request made, but no actual commitment on the part of the intended performer. Another scenario is that a request was made but there was never any kind of response at all, let alone a specific commitment. Next time you think you need to complain about an unfulfilled request, go back and take an objective look at what happened, what was said and not said. You may well find that what you really need to do is make a clearer request and or make sure you get a response. On the other side of the coin, when someone comes to you and complains that you didn't do what you'd said you would, you can go back through the same process. So, in summary, the basic conversations for action are requests and offers, responses and commitments. The clearer and more effective these are, the more likely that you will actually get what you want. Additional conversations include negotiation in response to a counteroffer, revoking and renegotiating a commitment, canceling a request, reporting completion, and declaring satisfaction, which usually can simply be thank you. How effectively you and others you work with manage these conversations has an enormous impact on your success and well-being at work. The better you are at it, the greater the likelihood you and your company will achieve your desired results. And here's some additional information and resources you may be able to take advantage of. Thank you very much.